So I have this memory. I was in 5th grade, maybe 6th grade, and it happened at least once, if not twice. And it was during the checkup where the school nurse would call about 7 or 8 of us down at a time to get weighed, get our height, and get our eyes checked. Maybe that's bringing back some stuff, your own memories of what that was like, where we all would flood into the nurse's office and we would plan how we were going to distract her. And it involved me. I was the one set to distract her, to talk her into any sort of topic. It's no wonder I ended up as a preacher and a teacher. I was able to distract, right? So while I would engage her in conversation, a couple of the others would run to the other side of the office, memorize all of the bottom lines of the eye chart, and then come back and tell us all about it. And lo and behold, we all had 20/20 vision, right? That happened at least once, if not twice. And then I think eventually we got caught. A very innocent story, a very fun story, right? Maybe even well-intentioned. Nobody got hurt. And yet, when we take what Sirach tells us and apply a sieve to that innocent story, that fun story, and when we shake it, what gets exposed? But fear. Fear of not being able to see. Not be able to have 20/20 vision. A fear of not being perfect. That's what that story really reveals. And maybe we laugh and we resonate with it because some of that stuff still needs to be shaken out of us. Being able to admit that we might not be able to see clearly. I like to think that's what Jesus was getting at in today's gospel when he gave these very ridiculous, laughable instances of noticing the splinter in another person's eye, but not noticing the wooden beam coming out of your own. Really? That's ridiculous. Of course we would notice it. We all know that when we have that little speck of dust, it can distract us for hours as we roll our eye around. And then it's like, wow, that was just a little speck. So what would a wooden beam do? And maybe, of course, we would pick bad fruit or good fruit from a bad tree or good fruit from from a thorn bush or whatever. Well, because we have a wooden beam in our eye and we can't see clearly. So surely they're laughable examples, but they're true examples from our life because they reveal that we have blind spots at times, that we do not always have 20/20 vision. And isn't that what Jesus did for his disciples? Isn't that what Jesus did for the world? Isn't that what Jesus does for us? Provide a vision, but first help us to admit that we need a vision and that we don't see clearly at times. It's true individually where we have something in our eye and we're blinded by it. But it's also true as a community at times. Even a community, just as we were as kids, participated in blindness. And we needed somebody else to come into that group to really get our eyes examined. So even communally, we can suffer from blindness. We don't have to look too far when we see this to be true. On the news, the internet, the papers. Our church suffers from blindness. Our country suffers from blindness. Our world suffers from blindness. And we need someone to show us, to admit that we're not always seeing clearly. This blindness comes out in all sorts of ways. It comes out in all of the isms of our day, in all of the phobias of our day. And we need a sieve to help us sift through it all. Because it doesn't take much to realize that sexism, racism are blind spots in our church, in our country, in our world. Every ism, every phobia is present. Do we have the eyes to see? Do our wooden beams cause the splinters in the other's eye? Can we help people to see? Or sometimes do we block people from seeing? Isn't this what the mission, the healing mission of Jesus is all about? Healing blindness, providing vision, providing God's vision. That whole adage, love is blind, actually goes out the window, because through Jesus, true love is not blind. God's love sees. God's love provides sight and insight into the heart of each person, into the heart of our world. But sight is uncomfortable. Being able to see and admit that we don't always see, that we're not always right, that we have fears, that we have things that are blocking us, like wooden beams that we've been carrying around. Can we allow Christ to take those fears, those beams, and put them on the cross, and see that those fears, those beams, become an entry point to salvation, love, and healing? Because the truth is, our fragility, our vulnerability is precisely the point in which Christ enters. It's precisely in those moments of our blindness, when we admit them, that Christ can come in and do what Christ does best, and that's to transform. So yes, we do have to admit that at times we are like the blind leading the blind, and that we need vision, and that it's hard to take a further step on our journey. Yet Jesus provides the way for us. When we hold on to each other in community, and when we can admit that we might not be getting it right, that's a step in the right direction. That's a step, the step toward Eucharist and healing. When we come in that beautiful communion procession, isn't that what we're doing? Sometimes the blind leading the blind, helping each other along the way, hoping against hope, and trusting that God will catch us when we fall and provide the source and nourishment to get back up. So in a few moments, as we approach the table, we're going to be getting our eyes checked. Let us not fear this exam. And yes, let us help each other to see how God sees and to see what God wants us to see, which is the loving, real presence always and everywhere before us.